Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about taking the OSCP and just some advice that I have for taking it. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Alright, jumping right in. As far as preparing for the OSCP goes, this is just some advice for studying and preparing. First and foremost, the OSCP exam is heavily exposure based, and that's something that you're going to see pretty heavily in information security and hacking in general. With this, I recommend, with your lab time that comes with the course, with pen testing with Callie, I recommend trying to do as many boxes as you can. Try to do some of the harder boxes, such as pain, things like that. Once you start running out of time, you can start doing other boxes that have been recommended as OSCP-like. TJ Null has a list, and then the mayor also has a list. I'll put those a little bit further along in this video. But this is something that not a lot of people realize. I actually recommend reading write-ups. If you start running out of time and you want to try to get a lot of exposure, start reading write-ups for everything that's on those lists. There are usually public write-ups for a lot of those boxes, especially for Try Hack Me or Hack the Box, and even Vonhub has a lot of write-ups as well. Try to focus on some that are a little bit more difficult so that you can have some more insight into privilege escalation and things like that, but this is going to get you a lot of exposure. Even if you're not necessarily absorbing all of it, you're starting to process, I've seen this before. Maybe you run into a program that you've seen it before and you know how it can be vulnerable, and that can save you a lot of time. That can be the difference between spending a couple hours on your 25-point box to spending 25 minutes on it and just being done with it right away. Next, I highly recommend Tiberius's Privest courses. He has one for Linux and one for Windows. The Windows one is excellent. Both of them go into a heavy amount of detail that this is essentially what you need to prepare for the Privest part of the exam. It's going to have pretty much everything that you need. The only thing that I recommend beyond that is his Windows one has a GitHub repo that goes along it, and he just has a bunch of prepackaged tools that he uses for privilege escalation. So the binaries that you need for example, print spoofer or things like that, they're all prepackaged in that. Grab that. Even if you don't necessarily want to do his courses, I really recommend having his repository just pulled down on your Kali box so that it's ready to go. Additionally, I do recommend trying to be familiar with some more recent popular privilege escalation methods that are very click to win. So for example, again, Juicy Potato and Print Spoofer, those are really good to be familiar with, just because they're going to help you a lot in the exam. Anything like that that is just popular and recent, especially as new things come out and this video ages a little bit, being familiar with what's actually used, even just keeping up a little bit with InfoSec on the whole in the blogging scene can help you a lot there. Additionally, and this comes down to really preparing before you're ready to take the exam, I highly recommend pre-writing as much of the report as you can, as it's going to make your life a lot easier. Once you're done with the exam, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into the reporting side of things, your brain might be just fried. It's a lot to do in 24 hours. It's a very full day. Try to pre-write as much of that as possible. Use an exam template. The OSCP one provided by OffSec is excellent. I recommend grabbing one that's a little bit more filled in just because it'll save you time. Who's Flynn is actually the template that I ended up using, and it is excellent. I recommend going through and actually changing the notation in there to third person from first person, so it doesn't say I, but rather is in third person. That can be a little bit more professional, but that's up to your personal discretion there. Additionally, with the report, having a screenshot table, so pre-writing the report and then going through and making a sort of checklist for yourself of all the screenshots that you need can be very nice during the exam. It essentially just tells you everything that you need to have. And in addition to that, I'll have, keep an eye on my Twitter, and I'll put the link to it once it's out in the video description for this. I'll have a Notion template for taking notes during the exam and just how I did it. That'll make things pretty easy. Regarding submission, there's a little bit that you can do for preparation on this aspect. I recommend actually taking a look at, John Heyman has a video on this, on getting the exam submitted. He has a repository they just created that has a tool that just prepackages and runs the commands for getting your report ready. Again, this gets back to the idea of you're probably going to be fried after, doing the exam itself and then writing the report. This can save you a lot of mental energy, which you're going to probably be in a little bit of short supply on, especially after going through the exam. You can get these commands from the OffSec PWK, the support page as well. I recommend just having them pre-written for you because it's going to make life a lot easier. And then you don't have to think as much and be worried, did I submit it correctly? And then you just have it ready to go. Additionally, when you're preparing and getting ready to actually take your exam, try to schedule it a little bit earlier in the day. It's going to make your life a lot easier because I find personally, and your mileage may vary on this, that when I'm waking up, there's a lot of dead zone there right away. You can't wake up and immediately expect to be productive, so there's a lot of waste time there. I recommend, I did both of my exam attempts, so my first one and my second one I had, I want to say at 11 o'clock in the morning. You could go even earlier. I think it goes a little bit into when you actually wake up for the day, but I recommend around 10 or 11 is probably going to be your best time because it gives you the full day that is going to be your most productive time to actually get the exam done. All right. The day before. So this is actually a piece of advice, and I'll go into it a little bit more of this later, that I received from one of my coworkers and a good friend. The day before the exam, I recommend doing one OSCP-like box. That way it's not too much, you're not trying to push yourself through a ton, but it does a great way of actually getting you in the mindset for taking the exam. So you're familiar with everything, everything's very fresh. Do whichever box set you feel like you need more practice on. So if it's Linux, do a Linux box. If you struggle with Windows privilege escalation, do a Windows box, something like that. Again, don't be too hard on yourself if it's a tricky box. If you need to, check the write-up, but again, I recommend doing that just because it's going to help you get into that mindset and be ready for the exam. Additionally, try to get all your food and water ready for the exam, any drinks that you want. Have them all pre-prepared because it's going to be less time sink during the actual exam day, and you're going to thank yourself later for that one. Do a final review. This can be just going through and reviewing your cheat sheets if you made anything like that, going through and reviewing maybe some box write-ups that you've done, review some boxes that you might not have done, something new. For example, if there's a new box on Try Hack Me that is being considered, potentially very OSCP-like or something like that, or on Hack the Box, go and review that because it's going to help you a lot with getting ready for the exam. And again, as I mentioned before, it's an exposure game, and it's going to help you a lot. And then last but not least, de-stress. Honestly, most of your studying should have been done way before this day, so cramming it I don't really view as going to help that much. I think you're better off trying to keep yourself calm. Do something that you enjoy doing. Maybe that's playing video games for a while. Maybe that's reading. Maybe that's spending time with your friends and family. Try to take it easy on yourself. Get a good night of sleep, and just try to remember that you need to take this day to be ready and rested for the next day with your exam. As far as exam day goes, I recommend getting connected to the actual VPN 30 minutes before your exam starts. I believe Offensive Security recommends 15 minutes. I recommend 30 because I found both attempts, it gave me just enough time to get everything ready. There wasn't any rush. That way I could get everything prepared for connecting, and I was able to get everything set up with the proctor. By the way, they are very, very nice. Just be polite to them. This way you aren't in a rush, and then you're not sitting there waiting with your nerves. And it makes life a lot easier. As far as getting the VPN set up, make sure that you have it going, the VPN on your Kali machine rather, not your actual host. That's technically wrong there. Make sure that the recording software is on your host, not on the Kali machine. And I'll adjust this when I release these slides a little bit later. Just make sure that you have things running on the correct machine. The proctor will help you get this going. They're actually, once you get connected, and I believe this is something that's covered in the PWK support material, they're going to go through the actual troubleshooting guide with you and make sure that you are connected properly. So be prepared to run the troubleshooting script that comes with your exam connection pack and copying that into your chat for the proctors. Next, once you are settled with that, I recommend getting started with your buffer overflow first. This way, it's something that you can go through pretty quickly. Take your time on this. Make sure that you're not making typos. Both of my exam attempts, I ended up making a typo, just something very small. For example, when I was looking for JMP ESP, I made a small typo in that. Go back through. If you get stuck on this, Start from the beginning and just walk yourself through. If you need to take a break on it, you can switch over to other boxes. Additionally, while you're doing this, run auto recon on everything else or whatever tool you want. Auto recon, I specifically recommend, as long as it's allowed, to give you a full picture of all the hosts, and it's going to give you everything that you need for reporting. So, for example, with reporting, you need to have all the open ports on the host, and this is going to have everything done and dusted for you. It may not catch everything. Sometimes I've had issues with auto recon, but they're pretty few and far between. But this will make sure that you have everything ready and you can start reviewing it as you are done with a buffer overflow or as you need a break from it. Additionally, read the exam documentation clearly. This is the documentation that's going to come on the control dashboard, so it's going to tell you what your boxes are, what the IPs are and everything, and your actual exam email. So make sure that you review that, and that's something that you can review beforehand to make sure that you are clearly, you know what box is what, and you know exactly what you need to submit. This is very important for screenshots, making sure that you know what you need to have in your local and proof screenshots. Regarding focusing during the exam, so you'll notice over on the right hand side, I have a picture of a kitchen timer, and you might think, what? This is a kitchen timer that I actually used one of these during my exam to set a 30-minute timer to sort of segment everything. Now, why would I do that? I gave myself 30 minutes on each box or whatever I was doing, and if I didn't get anywhere in 30 minutes, I moved to another box. This is to keep you from going down rabbit holes. These are very inexpensive. They're like $2 a piece. If you go to Walmart or your nearest grocery store, they're going to have these. Very easy. You can also do this with a timer on Windows or your whatever operating system you're using. It's going to help you a lot. This is probably the most beneficial tip that I ever received, and this is another one that I got from one of my coworkers. Take breaks. Be kind to yourself. Inspiration comes from letting your mind rest, and if you try to push yourself too hard, you are going to just fry yourself, and you're going to burn yourself out during the exam. There were a lot of times where I took a break, and I came back to a box, and, I went and walked around for a little bit, maybe checked my mail, and I thought, oh, what if I tried that? You're going to give yourself inspiration. Just be kind to yourself. If you push yourself too hard, you're going to make the exam tougher than it really needs to be. Make sure you eat and drink. So make sure you eat and make sure you drink plenty of water. And the next point here is also tied into this. Too much caffeine is a bad thing. You're going to make yourself probably more anxious than you need to be. Be careful. Have caffeine in moderation as you need it. I would recommend setting yourself a hard limit so that you don't have too much. Consuming an entire 10-pack of Red Bull is probably not a good idea, unless you're playing Call of Duty. But even then, during the exam, probably not a good idea and not a healthy thing to do in the first place. Refer back to cheat sheets if you're stuck. If you need to go into just, smooth brain mode, that's okay. Go back to your cheat sheets. This is why we make them beforehand, so that you can have the, just simple checklist that you made for yourself of what you need to go back and check. This is to make sure that you don't get just hosed over and you're stuck in one specific spot and you don't know how to hack your way out of a paper bag at that point. Box names can also be hints to your entry point. This is something that is seen in the PWK labs. Well, this is not something that I've seen as an absolute pattern. In fact, some box names can be very interesting. They're all really cool, but some of them don't necessarily make sense. A lot of times they can hint to what you need to exploit. So you're going to see a lot of services when you're examining the exam, or when you're taking a look at the exam boxes. Take a look at the names. If you can get them from scanning them, they're probably going to help you out quite a bit. Now, a lot of them only make sense in hindsight, so just be aware of that. It might be a little confusing, but sometimes they can be pretty obvious. Regarding Metasploit usage, this is something that I personally held off on until I absolutely needed it, or if I was just too lazy and I figured, you know what, this manual exploit, kind of a pain in the butt. Let me just use Metasploit. A lot of times Metasploit won't work out of the box for exam things, so just be aware of that. Just try to save this. If you can, try to use the manual variant first. Sometimes the check modules in Metasploit can be really, really helpful, especially if you swear that, man, it's got to be this, it's got to be this. But again, try to do the manual version first. Regarding reporting, once you're finished with your exam, I do recommend trying to start on this as soon as possible. Give yourself a short breather. Maybe that's an hour and a half, but don't let yourself, take a long break. and say, oh man, I'll get it, I'll have plenty of time. The more time you can give yourself, the more relaxed you're going to be during reporting, and the better your report is ultimately going to be. It's going to make life a lot easier for you overall. Additionally, try to give yourself time to review it before submission. That is something that I do recommend. Once you're done with the report, take an hour to go do something else, as long as you have that hour to spare, and then come back and actually review it before you submit it. Don't put yourself in a time crunch with this, but that way you can go back and catch simple mistakes. Maybe there was a section you forgot to fill out. Something simple like that. It happens. Be kind to yourself. Try to give yourself that time. Suppose you didn't get enough points. That's okay. It happens. Most people actually don't pass on their first attempt, and I certainly didn't. My first attempt, I ended up getting 67.5 points, where I had my buffer overflow and I had my 10-point box, both fully rooted, and then I had user on everything else, so it was probably roughly 67.5. Man, I was kicking myself thinking, I should have done the lab exercises and all that. And that's certainly a situation where doing the lab exercises, if you have the time for it, they're absolutely going to be incredibly beneficial, and they will get you out of that rabbit hole. If you didn't, and you don't have enough points, I recommend doing the report anyways. Doing the report anyways is going to give you practice with the report, and practice makes perfect. It's going to help you a lot. Just something that you really should do anyways. Worst case scenario, for example, if you get the buffer overflow done, a lot of that is going to be transitive, so you can just take that and put it on your next report and just change out the screenshots and all that. And then you've got a lot of it pre-written for your next report, more than anything. Focus on the positive, so focus on what you did well. Don't try to be too negative with yourself. I see a lot of people after the exam that are really, really hard on yourself, and, it happens. What you really want to do is the next bullet point on here, which is reflect on areas for improvement. So if you can try to find where you need to improve. So for example, after my first attempt, I got stuck in a lot of those priv-asks, and there were just silly things that, some silly things that I missed, that going back through and identifying that, hey, I really needed to work on my privilege escalation. Going through and working on that helped me out a lot, and, it certainly made me a better hacker. So try to focus on that. Try to make yourself a list of 1 to 5 things that you need to improve if you end up not getting enough points. And even then, if you do get enough points, this is a great way that you can focus on growing and rounding yourself out a little bit better. And then reach out for advice. Suppose it didn't go well, reach out for help. You need to ask for help in order to get it a lot of times. Sometimes that can just be Googling for it. So go out, find resources. A lot of times, people that have already done the OSCP exam have resources that they found particularly helpful that they can send you and say, hey, go take this course. Go do this, and it'll help you a lot. So just something to be aware of. Submission and completion. So pay close attention to the exam submission guidelines. Offensive security is really, 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 really strict about this, so just be aware of that. Having as much of this pre-written as possible can make reporting easy, and again, you should have done this during your prep. It's going to make life so much better. Do your research as well. When you're writing the actual report, make sure you understand what you did and why it worked. So one of the things that I really like doing in general, and then for the exam report, is I link to the National Vulnerability Database. This is an awesome resource, and it's going to give you a very thorough explanation, usually, of how something worked, how it occurred, and it'll give you the CVE as well as the actual score. So how severe of a vulnerability was it? It's going to help you out a lot. So make sure you do your research. This can be blogs. Going out and finding things like that are going to help you a lot. Awesome resources as well. So I mentioned this before, and links to everything are going to be down in the description for this video. TJ Null on the Mayor's box list. I recommend taking a look at both of these. So there's a combined one that has both, but it's missing the Vuln Hub section of it. And there are a lot of awesome boxes in there. Review both of them. There are a lot of free sections in there too. So maybe you don't necessarily want to pay for a subscription somewhere. Use the free boxes. Use your free resources. IPSec rocks. This is IPSec's website. You can just type this directly into a browser. This is an awesome, awesome website during the exam. So say, for example, you haven't encountered a resource before, or some sort of service like a web server. A lot of things. Something that I like to do during the exam was I actually took that service name, popped it into IPSec's website, and I saw if he had a video on it. It really is very helpful, and it might not be how to exploit it, but he might talk about specifically different exploits that are available for that service. It's going to help you out a lot. So go through it. I mean, best case scenario, you might see exactly the exploit that you need, and he's going to walk you through it. and it's awesome. And again, additionally, if you haven't checked out IPSec, I highly, highly recommend checking out his channel. There's a lot of awesome content on there that is going to help you prepare for the exam, especially his walkthroughs of various boxes. Additionally, this is something that is a staple in hacking. The Pentest Monkey reverse shell cheat sheet is going to help you out a lot. This is a bunch of one-liners that can help you, especially if you're stuck and maybe what you're using isn't working to get a shell back. Tiberius's Privest courses, I mentioned these before, but they are an absolute godsend for the exam. Go through, study these, try to go through them to completion. I recommend actually purchasing his courses. They are worth the money. They're worth their weight in gold for all as I'm concerned. They're excellent. Additionally, Tiberius has rooms for both of them on TryHackMe that they're both free and they're awesome. I recommend going through and doing that. Then the PWK support page. This I will also have linked down below. This is probably my favorite resource overall. It's essentially an FAQ on the course and the exam, and it's going to help you out a lot. Something that I recommend referring back to, especially if you have a question about maybe a tool, if I can use it, or how does submission or something work. This is going to help you out a lot. And then thank you for watching. If you have any questions, hop into my Discord. I have a link down below. I recommend subscribing. Keep up for great content. I'm going to have a video series coming out soon, which is going to be how to get an internship in InfoSec, the complete guide of what you need to know. And then follow me on Twitter for updates. Otherwise, thank you for watching and happy hacking.